Welcome to Stand in the Gap Today with your host, the Honorable Sam Rohrer, President of the American Pastors Network.
Here, at the beginning of 2023, we'll devote every other Wednesday, as we've done for the last many years on this program, to Israel, prophecy, and the Middle East. And we're going to do that starting today, here, this Wednesday, the 4th of January, with Bill Salus, founder of Prophecy Depot Ministries website he has at prophecydepot.com. That's where you can go to find a whole host of materials and resources that he has. But he's with me today, and the theme I've selected for today's program is this: the peace treaty that triggers the tribulation. Now, according to biblical prophecy, the actual trigger to the start of the final 7-year period of the church age, preceding the start of the 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ from Jerusalem, is a peace treaty or a covenant between some individual later identified as the Antichrist and the leaders of Israel. Now, this tribulation period is marked by an outpouring of God's wrath on the earth, and to the Gentile world, it's known, generally we call it the tribulation period. But to the Jews, this period of time, as prophesied in Scripture, is known as the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, it's this period of time that, based on all the prophetical signs, is literally unfolding before us. And that's going to be the focus of our discussion today between Bill, Salus, and myself. And with that, Bill, thanks for starting out this program and this focus with me this year. It's so great to have you back.
Well, Sam, thanks for having me. I think we're going to have a few shows this year that are going to be very interesting.
I think we will. There's so many things happening. There's a reason to anticipate that. Now, Bill, I want to have you lay out some things that you believe based on what we already know, what has happened, and what is in the works, actually, may make this year of 2023 so amazing. Now, you wrote a book some years ago, but boy, is it current, and I think you entitled it Apocalypse Road, Revelation for the Final Generation. Any comments on that book briefly, but just give us an overview, if you could. What do you think may happen in 2023 prophetically that is significant about Israel and the Middle East?
Absolutely, Sam. Sure. The book Apocalypse Road is the second book in a two-book series. The first book was Revelation Road. And what I did was I combined a novel with a commentary in both of those books because we talk about these prophecies, Sam, and they're interesting, but how is it going to affect a family when they go through these things? So the goal of that series was to put a family through the prophecies that are happening, setting up to happen now, will happen on into the tribulation and that sort of thing. So that book is very interesting. It covers quite a span of prophetic time. Now, shifting our attention to 2023, there's a potential that more than convergence of signs and stage setting that we're seeing going on over the last several years, especially during the COVID pandemic period of time, we might actually see the literal fulfillment of a biblical prophecy, or maybe prophecies, plural, in 2023. The signs are pretty clearly evident, especially with what's going on in the Middle East with the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu forming right now. And it's been in May of this year, 2023, Israel is going to celebrate its 75th anniversary. And so I think, and that was the last literal fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. Yes, the stage is setting for many things, but literal fulfillment of biblical prophecy, that's what I'm thinking about, right, my radar this year. I will caveat by saying this, though. The former newscaster, Dan Rather, had made a statement when he was asked about a future event, and he's a newscaster, right? He doesn't know biblical prophecy. He said, "He who lives by the crystal ball learns to walk on a lot of broken glass." So I always caveat, listen, these prophecies will find fulfillment. And the question is, well, how soon? Because God is so long-suffering, Sam, as you know, as a pastor, that we can't push the prophetic calendar pages forward at our own fancy. He's gonna execute his vengeance and fury and pour out his wrath in the tribulation when the time comes, right? When he's deemed the time has come. But what I'm looking at right now is that this new right-wing government that's being formed around Benjamin Netanyahu, they're gonna start to stir the pot. This National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, he just went to the Temple Mount. Matter of fact, yesterday He's going to be interested in giving Jews equal rights on the Temple Mount. Right now it's controlled by the Muslims. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel made a colossal mistake and gave control over the Temple Mount to Jordan through this WAC, W-A-Q-F, Antiquity Society. And ever since that time, Israel's been regretting it. But Ben-Gvir is going to want the Jews to have equal rights, access. They've even petitioned recently. They think it will not fall on a deaf ear with Ben-Gvir. They want to do the next Passover. They want to sacrifice on the Temple Mount. Now, they do petition this every year, but they think Ben-Gvir is going to go forward with it. He's going to probably change the status quo on the Temple Mount. And that, we know, will happen ultimately because there will be a tribulation temple. A third temple will be built there. So it can't be the way it is right now. Is this going to be leading into him changing the Temple Mount status quo? The other thing we're watching closely is the Smotrich, the de facto prime minister of the West Bank. He's going to liable go and start annexing territory.
Okay, and with that, Bill, we'll hold it right there, ladies and gentlemen. Rights for Jews, Temple Mount, annexing property. All of those things could be on the table this year. When we come back, we're going to get right into now the treaties, talk about treaties with Israel, and the treaty that triggers tribulation. Today, we're going to look at the peace treaty that triggers the tribulation. Bill, in your book, we've referenced our Apocalypse Road Revelation for the Final Generation. You devoted some attention to historical aspects of peace treaties, specifically regarding Israel. For the record, would you cite just a couple of them, the most important ones leading up to the present time as they relate to Israel and pertinent biblical prophecy, because they did more than just reestablish the state of Israel in 1948, didn't they?
Absolutely. You know, in the last century, we had some very significant treaties. For instance, we had the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed on June 28th of 1919. That ended World War I, very significant global impacting treaty. Then in November 29, 1947, the United Nations did the Partition Plan, which reestablished the Jewish state of Israel, which happened in May 14th of 1948. December 13th, 2007 was the Treaty of Lisbon, which established the constitutional basis for the creation of the European Union. So now we got, these are three monumental agreements of the 20th century that were significant because world wars, the reestablishment of the state of Israel, and the revived Roman Empire are all relevant end times prophetic topics. But as notable as these three accords were, Sam, they're going to pale in comparison to, I believe, in this century, and I don't know how much further down the road, maybe not too far down the road, a forthcoming covenant, which is predicted in the Bible, that starts with tribulation. We find this in Isaiah 28, verses 15 through 18, and Daniel 9:27. We call it the false covenant because it's based on lies and falsehood, but it is a 7-year covenant that we find in those passages.
Okay, and so that sets it right up. So let's just talk about that right now, because we can look back and see all the things that you mentioned, all of them fundamental, all of them foundational, but all of them bringing us to the point of what the Bible puts emphasis on. The Bible doesn't talk about the Versailles treatment, but it does talk about this one here that triggers the tribulation period. Would you identify the parties to this treaty yet to be made and what we know about the basic components of that treaty?
Absolutely. You know, the two proof texts that I just quoted, Daniel 9 and Isaiah 28, they give us a lot of details. Many of the listeners may not be familiar with the other important prophecy in Isaiah 28, verses 15 and 18. They may be familiar with Daniel 9:27. Daniel 9:27 will tell us this is a 7-year contract with term. It's confirmed by the Antichrist. He's the confirmer of the covenant. He's a political figure who Israel will trust and some other party will trust, much like Israel trusted Bill Clinton to broker a treaty with Jordan and Jimmy Carter to broker a treaty with Egypt. The Antichrist will be a political figure that Israel will trust to confirm this covenant. And it will enable temple sacrifices, we're told, to be sacrifices and offerings. And Daniel tells us in the middle of the 7-year period, the Antichrist will void out that covenant. He will actually go into the temple and do the abomination of desolation. But that doesn't tell us who the other parties are. The other parties we find in Isaiah 28, and the motivation. Why is Israel even going to get involved in this covenant? Which turns out to be detrimental because it starts the 7-year tribulation time clock ticking. But the other party is death and Sheol, we're told in Isaiah 28, verse 15. So we say, well, who are they? We got to put a face on them. Israel's motivation to even get involved in the covenant is because death and Sheol are the perpetrators of what's called an overflowing scourge, and this is in the seal judgments. We're told this is the pale horseman, the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, shows up as death in Hades. Apparently, they're perpetrating an overflowing scourge. So what are they doing? And we find out, and also in Isaiah 28, that this whole covenant is based on lies and falsehood. And in Isaiah 28, verses 18, it will actually be annulled. So, Sam, we're given very important details between those two sets of passages. But then you have to do your homework to find out, well, who's he talking about? Who's death and Sheol? What are they doing on the world scene at the time that is so grievous to Israel that they want to involve themselves in a false covenant for their security and protection? Now, some people think that, well, that's got to be the covenant that comes together to end the peace treaty between the Arabs and the Jews. But when you look at Isaiah 28 and Daniel 9:27, you don't see anything dealing with anything relevant to the Arab-Israeli conflict. If anything, you see aspects of the revived Roman Empire because the Antichrist comes out of the people of the Roman Empire. It says in Daniel 9:26, the Antichrist will come out of the people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary, which would be the temple and the city of Jerusalem. And that was the Roman Empire, 70 AD. So we have important details to find out, well, if it's not the Arab-Israeli conflict, which I think ends with the shows we've done in the past, we talk about Psalm 83, the Israeli Defense Forces go to war, they win wars, they defeat their Arab enemies, which I personally think when we talked about in the first segment that Ben-Gvir is going to go and change the status quo on the Temple Mount, and Smotrich's going to go into the West Bank, and he's going to start annexing territory. I think that's going to lead to the prophecy of Zechariah 12:2, which says Jerusalem will become a cup of trembling to all the surrounding peoples, the Arab countries around Israel that are actually involved in the Psalm 83 Confederacy. And it says when they lay siege on Judah and Jerusalem. So I think what's going to happen is the Arabs are going to start to flip out here, maybe as soon as this year, as they see changes going on in the Temple Mount, as they see Israel moving forward and annexing territory in the West Bank, as they see the hopes for a two-state solution and the Palestinians' future, sort of waning away. And I think they're going to lay siege on Judah and Jerusalem, which I think then leads to, and here's the mistake in that. Zechariah 12:6 says, and this is related to the cup of trembling in Zechariah 12:2. It says, in that day, Sam, I'm going to quote the verse, in that day when they lay siege on Judah and Jerusalem, I will make the governors, read that as the Israeli defense forces of Judah, that will be Israel, like a fire pan in the woodpile and like a fiery torch in the sheaves. And they, the Israeli defense forces, shall devour all the surrounding peoples on the right hand and on the left, geographically in proximity, right those people around Israel, round about. But Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place. I see that as connecting to that Psalm 83 Confederacy prophecy we talked about. We'd ask the listeners to go back in the archives to find that. And I've got books written about this stuff. I read about it in the Revelation Road and Apocalypse Road. But Sam, I don't see that this can go on much longer. God is ultimately going to curse those who curse Israel. He's been very long-suffering today. But at some point, these things are going to happen. Jerusalem's going to be a cup of trembling. And if Ben-Gvir continues to move forward with his agenda on that Temple Mount,
yeah, Bill, I'm going to interrupt just because I have about a minute left. I've shared with some of our listeners before, I was in Israel the 1st of December. I was there, and I went to the Knesset. I heard Benny Gvir. I was right there in front of him. I listened to him speak. He was part of the 14-member coalition of the ultra-right, as called, that was holding out and preventing Benjamin Netanyahu from forming the coalition. I know then from what was discussed that they are wanting changes relating to exactly what you talked about, the Temple Mount, worship, just as you said, rights for Jewish people. They are pushing behind the scenes for imposition of religious rule, Talmudic governance there, at least in Jerusalem, even Sabbath day rules being imposed in Jerusalem. And as I heard those things, Bill, I'm saying, wow, isn't this amazing? Because we know it goes right to the heart of what we're talking about here today, worship on the Mount. And what you're suggesting, what we're saying here, is the substance of this treaty soon to be made, I think, as you're saying as well. It just seems like it's right around the corner, but it does start the tribulation period. It is significant, ladies and gentlemen, and with that, we'll just transition from here and say, stay with us. We'll be back. I'm going to talk with Bill, now breaking out a couple of the points that he made that are in this agreement. What's meant by scourge, what's meant by the scorning leaders. We'll talk about these things, and you'll find how relevant it is. So continuing on in this, according to Scripture in Daniel chapter 9, 26 and 27, and Bill Salus referred to it in the last section, it says in part, "And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary." That's what Bill referred to in the last segment. Go back and listen to it. "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, a week of 7 years." That's the tribulation period now. "But in the middle of that week, 3.5 years in, said he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering." That's why we're saying that that peace treaty and what's being talked about now with changing the rules on the Temple Mount goes exactly right to this in real time. Now, the fact that the breaking of this peace treaty involves the temple, obviously, and worship, and stopping Jewish sacrifice and offerings, it means that the original treaty involved the elements of worship and some kind of protection for the Jewish people. And herein raises the question of why Israel's leaders make such an horrendous error by agreeing to the treaty. Okay, Bill, let's get into it, because you cover all this in a book. We're going to pull out just a few items here, and I'm going to encourage people to go to your site and buy the book. But you identified a few elements that Isaiah picks out in Isaiah chapter 28. One is a phrase that he mentioned, that the leaders of Israel who agree to this arrangement are scornful men. What's important to know about what this means? Scornful men. What is that?
Well, if you read the entire content of Isaiah 28, it talks about leaders in Israel at the time that are basically unaware of their position in biblical prophecy. They're not aware of course, they're still looking for the Messiah to come. They don't believe Jesus Christ was a Messiah. They don't understand that the New Testament needs to be connected with the Old Testament, etc. They're stuck on the Talmud and the Torah, etc. So they're not, God, from his perspective, Isaiah calls them scornful rulers. But Isaiah 28 verse 15 tells us the other important ingredients of this covenant that we talked about. You just read Daniel 9:27, gave us some of the important details. But what's interesting we've got to figure out is who is death and Sheol, because that's one of the other signatories. What are they doing? They're perpetrating what's called an overflowing scourge in Isaiah 28:15, and that is panicking the Jewish people on their goal to become, to hasten the coming of the Messiah, to have their temple, if it's not already built by that time, and I don't personally think it will be by the time the 7-year covenant is confirmed, because I believe the 7-year covenant, the true content of that false covenant, and there's 3 clues I can point out, time permitting, is so they could build a Jewish temple. Their goal is they want to build a Jewish temple, so because they want to hasten the coming of the Messiah. One of the things that they think the temple will do is if they have the temple, that the Messiah will come. So they're going to want to push toward that. I rule out the fact that it's not the content of the covenant has anything to do with the Arab and Jewish conflict, because we talked about this in the past segment. Once Israel takes out militarily through the Israeli Defense Forces the Arabs around them, they don't need a treaty for that. They've already resolved that conflict militarily, not politically. This is deeper. This is dealing with something's going on in the world. I believe this happens after the rapture of the church, because I'm a pre-tribulation rapture believer. And death and Hades, whoever they are, is perpetrating an overflowing scourge. And now we say, well, who's death and Hades? Well, it's interesting. Death and Sheol is the Hebrew word. Hades is the Greek word for Sheol. The 4th horseman of the apocalypse. So after the first horseman, which would be the Antichrist, we believe. Second one is the fiery red horse, where there's wars going on throughout the world. The third one is the black horseman, the third seal, the third horseman of the apocalypse. Is famines, scarcities, and pestilences, the results of world wars per se. And here comes this entity, the 4th horseman, the pale horseman. And it says, when he opened the 4th seal, I heard this voice from a living creature, the 4th living creature. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name on him that sat on it was Death and Hades. Interesting. they apparently show up. The other signatories of the false covenant show up in the fourth horseman. And it says, and power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger and death and beasts of the earth. Now, some people say they kill a quarter of the earth, but that's not technically what it says. It says power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to do something. So they have control, in my estimation, of a quarter of the earth to perpetrate their killing campaign, which we find out in the fifth seal that happens after this. The dissidents, especially if they're the believers, fifth seal saints are called, they're killing those people who dissent from this, and I believe death in Hades is dealing with the global religion. As a matter of fact, it says, in the Bible, death deals with material departure of a being from its body, and Hades is concerned with the immaterial aspects of a person after death, which is their soul. And presently, when someone dies, Sam, their soul is delivered to its destination, whether it's either in heaven if they're saved, or presently they go to Hades if they're not. So it's got a religious connotation. They come on the scene. I believe it's a global world religion. And they're killing people, namely Christians, who become believers after the rapture of the fifth seal saints. And we find out in Revelation 17:6, the mystery Babylon, the ecclesiastical world religion, the harlot world religion, it says that she is drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And I connect, through a serious study, that death in Hades is actually the global religion of the harlot world religion. And they are killing blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. So past campaign of killing, and a future campaign that will be happening, the martyrs of Jesus. And I think the Jews' concern is that they do not want that to read, and they're killing also the martyrs of the Jews. This entity, death in Hades, has control over a quarter of the earth, and a killing campaign, a Christian killing crusade at least. They may be killing anybody else who dissents, but they're certainly killing believers who come onto the scene after the rapture. And the Jews don't want any part of that to come on them. They're interested in bringing their Messiah forward and building their temple. And I've got some clues on what that is, but why it is the temple. If we have time, Sam, we should go over that. Why I think the true content of the false covenant is they want to stop the overflowing scourge from death in Hades, probably the harlot world religion that's on the scene at that time, and they want to build their temple. And when they build their temple, they'll hasten the coming of the Messiah, who they don't believe was Jesus Christ. And when he comes, he will get rid of that harlot world religion, that scourge that death in Hades is perpetrating, and he will usher them into their messianic kingdom, the millennium, which is a high point of Old Testament prophecy. So their goal at that point, and biblical clues support this, is to build their temple and bring forward the Messiah. And Isaiah warns them about that. He says in Isaiah 28, verses 16 and 17, after he's told about the false covenant, he goes, listen, behold, I lay in Zion a stone for a foundation, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not act hastily. I will also make justice the measuring line, and righteousness to plummet. The hell shall sweep away the refuge of the lies, and the waters will overflow the hiding place. So what he's saying to them is, don't act hastily with this covenant. You think you're going to bring the Messiah, but I'm telling you the Messiah has already come. The tried stone, we're told in 1 Peter 2, 4 through 8. The precious cornerstone is Jesus Christ, Matthew 21:42. The sure foundation, 1 Corinthians 3. They don't know the New Testament, these scornful leaders. He's warning them that the Messiah has already come. And so he's laying out these idioms for building a temple. The measuring line, the plummet, etc., the tried stone, the precious corner. He's telling them the Messiah has come and symbolizing all these things that's Jesus Christ, and you're going to act hastily. And we'd find out in Isaiah 28, verses 18, that this covenant will be annulled, and this overflowing scourge perpetrated by the Antichrist is going to come through and sweep through there, and their covenant's going to be annulled, and that happens in the middle part of the tribulation when Daniel says he will go into the temple and do the abomination of desolation.
Bill, as we examine headline news, we've done that today. Israel peace treaties, a soon coming treaty, which Scripture says will trigger the tribulation period. The Jewish leaders are warned not to do it. They do it. They believe a lie. They think they're protecting themselves, but they actually open up the floodgates of persecution from the Antichrist himself. And we see all of these things happening right now with the current administration in Israel, God having brought the nation of Israel to where it is right now over the last century. all preparing the ground, and we see all of these elements right now literally happening before our eyes. It's an amazing thing. So in light of what we shared today, and a whole lot more that's in the book that we didn't even get to, but here's some warnings. I'd like you to just give a bit of a warning or a summarization of what to learn from what we've talked about. Speak first to Jewish people who I would say are God-fearing. Now, I know you know a number of Jewish folks. I have a couple of rabbis with whom I've become personal friends. We talk about prophecy. They're studying Old Testament prophecy. They're looking ahead. But as you say, they're looking for Messiah to come the first time. I'm trying to say, no, he's already come. But there is an awareness. And I think God's doing something there. So what practical sense, what warning or conclusion would you offer to what I'd say God-fearing Jews today? And then if you want, work that right into then what remnant Christians, believers who are alive today, should do and respond to as a result of what we've talked about.
Yes, Sam, thank you. To the Jewish people who are still thinking the Messiah is yet to come, my first advice, and you're studying the Old Testament, and you should be, is to read Isaiah 53. The Messiah coming, he's coming as a suffering servant first. That was the first advent. That was fulfilled by Jesus Christ. And he's going to come as a Lion of Judah. And that's the second advent, and he'll be a second coming. Isaiah 53 was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls right around the time Israel became a nation. Read that. Let that speak to you. Also go online and find the 300-plus prophecies that Messiah fulfilled. There's no shortage of those being listed on the computer that the Messiah Jesus Christ fulfilled when he first came. Do that before it's too late and the censorship of online commentaries and Bibles is taken off. That'll be coming down the road. Also, go to Daniel 9:24 through 27. It talks about 70 weeks of Daniel. It talks about 69 weeks that you can count out and measure from the time that Nehemiah issued the decree to go back to Jerusalem and build the temple. You can count 483 years. These are weeks of 7. You can do the math. At 173,880 days, exactly to the T, is when Messiah presented himself in the exact fulfillment of Daniel 9:24 through 27. You need to look at those kinds of things to understand the Messiah has already come. And pretty soon your leaders are going to want to build a temple and hasten the coming of a Messiah who has already come. He's not going to come, some random guy's not going to come as the Messiah. Jesus Christ is the Messiah. To Christians, as we see the temple, the inklings to build that temple, which we know will happen in fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and if we see that they're wanting to do that, and that the covenant that's going to start the tribulation period for 7 years, the true content of that is going to enable them to build that covenant. And there's 3 clues I want you to look at. We just read Isaiah 28, verses 15 through 18, Revelation 11, 1 through 2, and Daniel 9:27. He actually goes in and stops the sacrifices and offerings. Those are 3 clues that the content of the false covenant is dealing with the tribulation period. And if that's the tribulation period, and the false covenant is about to be initiated down the road here pretty quickly, because they want to build the temple, the false covenant enables them that, then you need to realize that Jesus Christ is going to come get his church, his bride, out before the wrath of God comes out in that tribulation period. He's going to get us out of here before that covenant gets confirmed. And if that covenant is about to be set up and ratified so they can build their temple, then you don't have much time left. You're living on borrowed time. The good news is Jesus is going to come and get you real quick and take you out in the twinkling of an eye in 1 Corinthians 15 and 1 Thessalonians 4. But the thing is, you got family members and loved ones that are going to be left behind, and you know who they are. Friends, people in your sphere of influence that don't know Jesus Christ. They don't know the gospel. It's not a time to be worrying about your day-to-day cares and affairs. God will take care of those for you. You need to be witnessing to your loved ones and letting them know that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one gets to the Father but through him in John 14:6. And this is the time of the hour. The urgency is upon us right now.
Bill, that's an excellent summary. Thank you so much for that. We're really about out of time. And ladies and gentlemen, just a concluding thought I guess I have as well. If we really believe what the Word of God says, prophecy that we're talking about becomes ever more pertinent as we see all the elements converging. But as Bill made clear, the things that we're seeing happening are signs of Christ's second coming and the tribulation. The rapture has no signs. It comes at any time. That's why we must be ready at every moment, but knowing that we have friends We have family members who do not know the Lord. Oh, they don't want to be left behind. They really don't. And I hope that you are concerned and make priorities. Bill Salus, thank you so much for being with us today. His website, ladies and gentlemen, prophecydepot.com for the book we talked about and so much more. Thanks for being with us today. And Lord willing, we'll see you back here tomorrow, just 23 hours from now.